Alright, I thought I would do a how to fish video, and I think a good starting point is how to tie a good knot. And I'm not a professional tournament winning fisherman or a fishing guide or anything, but this is how I taught my family to fish, and we catch over 100 fish a year, so it seems to work pretty well. First I just loop through there, go through the hole one time, and then I'm going to pinch those, take the end, go through a second time, and then I pinch that. This end, I then wrap around, wrap around, wrap around, wrap around, at least that many times. Sometimes I go more. My string was kind of short. And it looks like that. When I pull it and it starts to get tight, put it in my mouth so it just gets some spit to make things slide along. And then I pull both so it's nice and tight, and I pull on the end so that it doesn't slide. Alright, and if you want to be extra cautious, you could just tie a simple square knot right there. Alright, so that's how I tie a knot. Go through twice so it's real strong. Then just take your pliers and cut off your extra. Not too short in case it slips at all. And pliers are really important to have. You want to have a knife, and a variety of different ways to fish. In case one isn't working, you can switch it up. For instance, I can use this swivel, and I could hook up a lure that goes to the bottom. I could hook up a floating lure. I could hook up a lure that just goes across the middle. We like the Kastmaster lures, so there's a little plug for Kastmaster. Maybe they'll sponsor me. But so that's one way that I could use this swivel, is with a lure. Another thing I could do is use just a hook that's on this leader called a snell, and I could just hook this on there and switch back and forth between using bait or a lure. This knot I could tie that right on a hook. If I wanted to fish from the bottom, I could use a hook and then some little weights, split shot weights like this, put a worm on there, and then this would be fishing from the bottom. I could also use a hook and put a bobber on there and a weight and fish from the top down. So whether you want to fish from the top down with a bobber, or from the bottom up with weights, using floating bait, that changes things also. But then you also have using lures and whatnot. So there's a few things to get started. And then it seems like when people are getting started, they like the push button reels so that they can cast just by pushing a button and then let go. Generally I like reels like this, where you got to flip the bail, cast, and then when you reel it flips back over. But there's a little bit about how to get started, what to have in your tackle box. I've also found that using a net can be really good to help land the fish. Catching them is one thing, landing them is another. And I'll add a little bit to this video of rigging up some different rigs too. So there you go. Okay, I'm going to show you guys another way to rig up a fishing pole. I just take a loop, run it through, so it looks like that. Makes a loop in the line. Super easy. Then I take a hook, it's on a snell, which is this fishing line. And then I get that through just like this, and so now my fishing hook is in the middle of the line. I go down about another foot or so, and I'm going to tie another loop. This is actually my third loop. And my third hook myself. Okay. Now this is just in the line. At the bottom, end of my line, I have a weight. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use floating bait. So this weight is at the end, 2 feet up, I have a hook, another foot up, I have another hook, another foot up, I have another hook. So I'll have 3 pieces of floating bait coming from the bottom up. And that's a good strategy to switch it up if you've been using a bobber and fishing from the top down. So I'm going to bait this up and cast it on out there. So, okay, so with that trout line, we had a weight at the end, and then I had these little hooks on lines. So there's the top one, they ate all the bait. There's the next one here, and then got a nice rainbow trout on there. Can tell by his fins that he's a stocked fish, but nice color. He's probably been eating some good insects. So, proof it works. There you go. Alright, here's our evening's worth of fish. The largest ones, this one, the largest trout, my son caught. This one, the largest smallmouth bass, my daughter caught. And I caught this one on the end. He's pretty good sized, but I only caught 3 with those trout lines I was showing you. So I guess my kids outfished me again. Alright, my favorite type of fishing is fishing from a kayak. It's nice because you're not on the beach, you're actually like part of the water. And I've been trolling. It's where you just sort of paddle along dragging your lure. And I might have been a little optimistic. This is the lure I was using. When you want to catch something big, you need a steel leader, because like big pike, their teeth will cut your line. So I might switch to something a little smaller. And this is my anchor, so I can anchor in place and then just cast from the kayak and fish like usual. One thing, if you're going to do any kayak fishing, you want to be sure that like your net and everything, your stringer, it's all tied to your kayak. Trust me, you pretty much want to have everything tied to your kayak. And it's really neat if you got clear water, because when you cast your lure, you can see the fish and see them chasing your lure, and then watch right as they hit on your lure. So maybe I'll switch back to that big lure, and I'll do an update video if I catch a big one. Alright, there's a really nice big rainbow trout I caught from the kayak. I was hoping I'd be filming a big huge pike that dragged me across the lake, but it's a pretty good looking fish. Alright, time to get him on the stringer. Here's another way you can fish that gets you out and in touch with the water, and that's using hip waders. You got to be careful on a river though. If you slip and those hip waders fill up with water, you can drown. But that's a lot of fun. Give that a try. Alright, here's one more rig for you. You got weights with holes in them, and I put them on like this, and so these slide along the line. And what this lets us do, it lets us fish from the bottom, and we're going to use floating bait. And so then that floating bait I can control how high up I let my bait float. And then we're just doing the same old two loops. Knot. But I'm just going to tie it off kind of quick. square knots. Alright. Then, like I said, we'll have some floating bait, and then this can float up, and these will be on the bottom, and so that's another way that you can fish from the bottom up. Alright, when you first hook a fish, give a slight pull so you set the hook. Then if he jumps, release a little tension. You want to slowly get him closer. When he pulls, I let loose. I'll let out my arm, tug him, and I'm working him slowly closer under that net. That's how I land a rainbow trout with a lure. Alright, last thing, I thought I'd show you guys how to maintenance your reel. And first, get a screwdriver or something and tighten up all the little screws. I think there's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, almost 10 in this kind of cheaper lure. So tighten those up. Then, anywhere that you see there's a continual, something with some sort of continual velocity, you'll want to lube in here on the spindle here, lube anywhere that is a part that's moving, and so I use this 3-in-1 oil. So tighten everything up, lube everything up, and then we're going to put new string on it with this device. It's real easy. You just tighten your reel in here, and then you have your string on this side, and all you do is take your string, tie it, make sure you go under the bail, tie it onto your reel, and then you just reel it up until you get the amount that you want. And usually on your reel it'll say 10-pound test, 100 yards at this gear ratio. So look on your reel and get yourself some good string. When you buy a reel, it will generally come with really cheap string, and you can tell when it's not under tension, it'll coil all up in a curl, and I hate that. So anyways, take care of your reel and you get fishing. Okay, so from the beginning, you want to get into fishing, what kind of fishing pole you might like. Thought I'd show you the gear that we leave up here at our fishing cabin. A big choice is whether you want it to be closed, push button reel, or open reel. This is easier to use. I kind of like those just because maybe that's what I started on. Pretty much all these you're looking at here are Shakespeare with a Berkeley and an Abu Garcia. But in my opinion, just because I'm used to these, I like the ones where you have to flick the bail. This is shrink wrapped in, so it's real sensitive and connected to the pole, so you can feel the fish test biting and things like that. I would recommend a cork handle, not just because it floats, but because then you can stick lures and stick them into the cork, and so I kind of like that. So I'd get a cork and kind of a longer rod. I like that, and other than that, they all have pluses and minuses, so it's kind of personal preference. So you get your fishing pole, take that cheap line off. You can use a device like this. Just it's battery powered, just strips the line right off your pole, put on the new line. When you do fish, make sure if it's a pole that comes apart in 2 pieces, make sure you stick that in there good and tight so when you cast, you don't cast half your pole out in the lake. And also these eyes, you want to line them up in a straight line so that when you cast, there's no friction. And other than that, you're ready to talk about bait. And you have artificial and real bait, and I'm talking about like using worms. You know, you can buy some night crawlers, and those are good if you're fishing from the top down with a bobber. They wiggle and they see them. You can fish from the bottom too with night crawlers, but I like night crawlers. And this is some salmon egg. That's another one that's really good. This is from a salmon we caught, and so I was going to try that. And I don't like using water dogs and things because I like salamanders. I like frogs, so I don't use those. I've used minnow before. You can use grasshoppers, and that's all the live bait and natural bait. Then there's artificial bait. Power bait's interesting because it floats. It's good in the trout lines and fishing from the bottom up, like I was talking about. Fishing in rivers, that can work. And then these shads, gooey things, those are another artificial bait. And other than that, you know, you're looking at lures. If you are fishing in a river, you can use a real teeny little bobber, and that'll help kind of keep your bait floating down the river and not getting stuck in the rocks. And so there's a little bit about bait. And then otherwise, you're looking at the lures, and don't forget there's also flies. And I like using flies in certain situations. But that should be enough to get you started, and then you kind of figure out what you have success with, and it depends on where you're fishing. And some other tips, some other things to look at is fishing the shadows. And other than that, you know, if you're sticking to sunrise and sunset or just before or after, you'll draw your own conclusions about the weather and the insects around. But you just got to get out there and experiment. So have fun.